What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time we're taking a look at American Pie 2. Let's waste no time. Let's get right into it. So, right off the bat, I'm just going to say it. I love American Pie 2. I think this is my favorite movie, the entire American Pie franchise. I think this movie is better than the first movie. Now, I love the first movie, but there's something about Pie 2 that always just gets me, and I always find myself laughing more with this movie as opposed to that first movie. I don't know what it is about American Pie 2 that I love so much. It's just it to me it's one of those comedy sequels that works for me. The jokes work for me, the gags work for me. The big comedic set pieces in this movie to me are much more memorable in this movie, and I'll get to those momentarily. But aside from that, I also like the development of the characters. Like that first movie, we see them in their high school phase. In this movie, they're just finishing up their first semester of college, and now they're going to spend this summer together by renting a beach house and throwing this big summer send-off party that they're going to make ancient and legendary. That Kevin puts together at the advice of his brother at the advice of his brother, played by Casey Affleck. All right. So with all that being said, let's just talk about American Pie 2 and try and get this review done as quick and as fast as possible. So, number one, most of the returning cast members return for this movie. Jason Briggs as Jim, Chris Klein as Kevin, Chris Klein as Oz, Sean William Scott as Stifler, Eddie K. Thomas as Finch, and Thomas Ian Nicholas as Kevin. The five, they all make their return for this movie, and they are just as good in this movie as they were in the first movie. Though I think in this movie, their acting is much more refined, and they just have a more genuine rapport in this movie. I'm not saying the rapport in the first movie was bad, but in this movie, the 2 year gap between Pie 1 and Pie 2, it really shows that these guys were maturing more as actors, and their chemistry is just felt more natural in this movie. And it kind of feels like you're seeing real life friends on screen. Like, I don't see actors. I see people who feel like legitimate friends getting into these crazy adventures that they go through in this movie, while all the while taking some journeys of self-discovery. Jim, played by Jason Briggs, he's on a journey of self-discovery. You know, he's trying to find out he's still trying to discover himself like he was in that first movie. Only this movie is a lot more different. In this movie, he finds out that he is a horrible A, and he wants to get better at it, and he gets advice from Michelle, played by Allison Hannigan, because Jim still wants to bed Nadia. But what I like about this is that the relationship between Jim and Michelle is further expanded upon in this movie, and what starts off as Michelle just giving Jim some tips and advice, it turns into a romance, a budding romance between the two, and it has a really nice payoff in the end. And this is where Jason Briggs and Allison Hannigan really got to explore the chemistry with their characters, and they work so good off one another. A lot of their scenes I thought were very, very funny. So like the development with Jim and Michelle works for me, and just Jason Briggs as a whole in this movie is fantastic. Let's not forget the super glue scene, which is still freaking hilarious. Great stuff. Uh, Chris Klein, who plays Oz in this movie. Oz, he doesn't really have all that much to do. I The way I describe that first movie is that the first movie is kind of sort of more of Oz's story, is more of Oz and Kevin's story as opposed to Jim's story. This sequel is more of Jim's story, and characters like Oz, he's kind of he's kind of in a comfortable place where he is. He's with Heather. They got a long-term relationship going on, and there's this running joke of them trying to have phone sex and always getting interrupted. So that's pretty much what Oz is here for in this movie. So like Oz's story's pretty much just been told in that first movie. So now he's just hanging along for the ride. But he does have some, good bits here and there. Kevin, his story is from the first movie is that he and Vicky have since broken up and now they've gone split still. And Kevin in this movie, he's trying to discover himself again. He's trying to pretty much let go of that high school mindset that he's in and step out of it. And and throughout the course of the movie, he slowly starts to, realize that things are not going to be like how they were back in high school. He's not with Vicky anymore. You know, he's not with Vicky anymore, and he has to learn to accept it and just move on with his life, which he eventually does. And it's a nice little character arc that Kevin goes through. Sean William Scott as Stifler. Stifler is just Stifler is Stifler. He doesn't go through any of these personal arcs. He's just there to be a mile of a minute, just throw out any random concoction of a raunchy joke at you and make it sound funny, and that's what Sean William Scott does best. But however, I would say this: Stifler does have some really good moments to himself as well. Let's not forget the lesbian. The lesbian scene in this movie is fantastic. The rivalry between Stifler and Finch is great too. Pretty much, Finch is obsessed with has become obsessed with Stifler's mom, and of course Stifler is not having any of this. And the entire movie is pretty much Stifler trying not to strangle Finch as much as he wants to. But like I said, Stifler does have some funny bits to him. Has a lot of funny stuff to himself as well. The champagne scene at his party, which is hilarious. The entire segment with the lesbians, which is my favorite, just part of the entire movie. It's hysterical with the walkie-talkies that everyone can listen into. Funny shit, love it a lot. And of course, I also like the running joke with Stifler talking to his little brother Matt, who Finch mistook for his mother. I thought that little gag was funny as well. So Sean William Scott as Stifler, he does have a lot of funny bits in this movie, as he does in that first movie. Though in this movie we get to see a little bit more Stifler as opposed to that first movie. So more Stifler is always fine with me, especially if it's Sean William Scott, because I love him as the character. He fits it like a glove. Like, you can tell Sean William Scott is having a blast playing Stifler, not only in that first movie, but in this movie as well. Great stuff. Once again, Eugene Levy returns as Jim's dad, and as in that first movie, Jim's dad is funny in this movie. Though in this movie, Jim's dad, he's kind of used very, very sparingly, but he and Jim, they do share a really nice moment where Jim, super glues himself, and then Jim kind of tells his dad that he's always been supportive of him and never judges the things that he gets himself into. I like that little scene, and it really shows just how close Jim and his father really are. That Jim can pretty much go to his dad with almost any problem, and they're gonna solve it together. I like that little moment. I like that between the two characters. It works for me. I enjoyed it immensely. The whole stuff with and of course this movie also had, like I said, like I mentioned before, you also have Jim's subplot going on with Nadia, which is what leads to Jim not wanting to be with Nadia, wanting to be with Michelle. Then Nadia has her own little storyline where she wants to get herself with a band geek, and she ends up with Sherman, who was a minor character from that first movie played by Chris Owen, the Shermanator. So that was funny too. Man, this movie's full of so many good things. You've got Jim who goes to band camp to try and find Michelle, and then he has to pretend to be this mentally challenged kid named Petey and play the trombone in front of an audience, which is funny shit, man. I could talk about American Pie 2 for a long time. I love American Pie 2. I don't really find this movie to have too many flaws. I mean, if anything, Oz doesn't really do much with his Oz and Heather. Their characters don't really do much. They do have interactions, but they don't really do much, and you can pretty much take them out of the movie and it ain't gonna mean much. But every other character in this movie is fun, neat, and they all have their own little funny bits to themselves. So yeah. With all that being said, to me, American Pie 2 is a solid, screw it. American Pie 2 to me is a 10 out of 10. I love American Pie 2. This movie is funny, it's hilarious. To me, it's a superior sequel that outdoes that first movie. Even though I did make criticism about Oz and Heather really not having much to do in this movie, they don't take away from the movie because they still have a nice little funny bit all to themselves. So yeah. American Pie 2 to me, solid 10 out of 10. I love this movie. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Pie 2. Let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe. and I'll check you back next time for more.